And hi, everybody. My name is Christy Craig. I am the publisher here at Hidden Timber Books, and I have the great honor of hosting this small press author reading series that I've been doing since COVID hit, basically. And I've just find that I'm really enjoying it, and so it's turned into much more than a quarantine kind of event. It's a way to bring people together. So I'm honored to see you all here. It's been fun to just kind of hang out and listen to you all say hello to Jane and give her so many congratulations. It's a lot of fun, a lot of beautiful faces here. So one thing that I've been doing in these small press author reading events is just taking a minute in the beginning to introduce you to another small press and another author real quick as a way to, just give you different things to look at. So I wanted to share with you this little zine. It's like a pocket kind of book, and it's published through Microcosm Publishing, which is in Oregon, and it's written by an author named Laura Stanfill. She is also the publisher of Forest Avenue Press, which is another independent out in Oregon. And she's written this little zine that is about grief and healing in the times of COVID. And, we're all experiencing some sort of grief in one way or another, whether it's because we're sitting alone at home or it's a variety of things. And she goes through some of the things that she's experienced since then, how she's coped with them, how she's talked about them with her daughters and things like that. So I encourage you to take a look at Microcosm Publishing, take a look at this zine, and there are lots of other things that they publish that I'm sure would be of great interest. So thanks for letting me take a moment to share that with you. And now I would like to get to Jane Perry. I'm so excited to have her here today and hear her talk about her book. I'm really love this idea of what I read from her website, this diaries, documentarian, and reflective functions. I think that's a really cool way to explain what journals and diaries do for us as a society, but as an individual. So a little bit about her. Jane Perry is an author with a history and many publications in education of young children. Her work has appeared in Persimmon Tree, McSweeney's Quarterly Concern, Women Writers, and more. She is a member of the Society of Fearless Grandmothers and 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations. Jane lives on unceded land of the Lishan Ohlone in the territory of Huichin, and I'm sure I've totally messed up those names, so hopefully, Jane, you can correct me. And that's in Oakland, California, and I will let her tell you more about that land. And also, just to let you know, 100% of the proceeds from this book are donated to a land trust that she can also share a little bit more about with you. So I will pass the baton to you, Jane. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Christy. And I'm just so very grateful to you and to Hidden Timber Books. Your integrity and your love of books and authors and writing, and your endurance through the pandemic while other readings have fallen aside is a real grace, and I just really appreciate it. I want to thank Atmosphere Press for embracing Whitesnake Diary and it's the beautiful artifact that it created. I also want to thank everybody who's here. We are in extreme unbalance, and every time we get together is an opportunity for our energy to come together in a compassionate way of conscience and justice and balance. And I just really appreciate you all for being here for that. Wherever we sit, we are guests on stolen land if we're not Indigenous. We acknowledge that Indigenous people have a relationship with land. And as guests, we want to be good guests. And we want to find out whose home we are on and ask those people, tell them we're here and that what can we do to help. For me, I make a small support in a very respectful and humble way to Sogorea Te Land Trust, which and their Shumi tax, which is a way for the Lejan Ohlone to work to reclaim Chochenyo and Karkin land to their indigenous stewardship. So I'm very, very grateful to be able to make that contribution regularly and to use White Snake Diary as a voluntary contribution. And I'm very grateful to everybody who's made that purchase. And I encourage people to share this donation opportunity. And so now I'm going to read you a little bit from White Snake Diary by Jane P. Perry. And I'll be dipping in and out of it for about 6 or 7 minutes, and then we can have some questions and talk and proceed, and I can go back to reading. Part 1, White Snake Sleeping. Number 1. I wake up to crisp, clean white sheets. Sun shines bright through the window. My husband sleeps at my left side. To my absolute horror, a humongous boa-sized white snake sleeps warm against my right side. My index finger is in the snake's mouth, lodged there by a fang. The fang punctures the tip of my finger. I feel no pain. I think if I just keep quiet and do not move, stifling my rapid heartbeat, I will be safe. What I do, however, is slowly and meticulously slip my finger off of its mooring. I'm exceedingly grateful that the snake is so lethargic. Its somnambulistic dead weight tells me I'm not in immediate danger. I wake my husband to alert him. We have to be at an appointment. If we let this sleeping snake lie only to return to an empty bed, we're going to be racked with anxiety. Shall we stuff the snake in a pillowcase, bundle and tie it up in the sheet? Well, then what do we do with it? Our appointment looms. I abandon this frantic predicament and wake up. I record this dream, however, as the first entry of a new diary because it's so vivid. Part 2, my garden story. What is a diary and why do we keep them? Merriam-Webster defines diary as a record of events, transactions, or observations kept daily or at frequent intervals. Sounds simple enough. Certainly a diary can be institutional in nature, a bookkeeper's prim record of transactions and accounts, but a diary can also surrender to the unconscious, vault free of restrictions, incorporate just about any idea or object. A diary need not be restricted to words. Some diary keepers use a collage form, nor need one's diary be written on paper. Cave paintings, clay tablets, rock carvings, papyrus, videos, blogs, all have been used to record hopes, desires, ideas, records, incantations. But why do we do it? What makes the cut? What is too mundane or too unspeakable to include? What does the diary as a literary genre look like, and what can it tell us? I am in a junk store that calls itself a depot for creative reuse. I rummage through stacks of empty photo albums. Among them, I come across one that's not empty. It contains a snapshot chronology of a smiling girl I will call Carolyn. I'm drawn to Carolyn's snapshots, which spark memories from my own childhood. I add to my new diary, weaving into it bits of these memories. With Carolyn by my side, I insert school assignments, snapshot-inspired vignettes, childhood diary entries, cereal box ticks, poems, letters, duels, dreams. Times I wonder whether I'm creating my own diary or Carolyn's. I continue on into my present life with workplace documents, essays, telephone conversations, and professional reports. Carolyn's role is over, I tell myself. She was amused for my new diary. I thank her for her help and plan to dismiss her, proceeding with my own stories inspired by her snapshots, but something in the energy of her photos insists on my attention. Carolyn wants to come along for the ride. Number 2. Number 4, My Garden Story, a True Story by Carolyn. Marcel and I pressed the dirt into little pesses over the bulbs, and then we dusted our ham, and then we were to recess. When it comes to nature diaries, a just the facts approach can be fascinating. In Baby Birds, an artist looks into the nest. Ornithologist and natural history illustrator Julie Zickafoos records the daily developmental progression of birds from hatchling to fledgling, which had never been done before. Zickafoos lays the nestling on a bed of tissues directly on her diary page for an as close to exact watercolor rendering in life size, notations included, before the hatchling exhibits readiness to return to the nest. Number 7, Feel icky. Had to go to the medical center to be cultured, wore my PJs. Temp today, first 103, then 100.4. Yesterday temp was 102.4. Sore throat bothers me a lot. So far I've been out of school 4 days. After his 2 years out on Walden Pond, the environmentalist Henry David Thoreau came back into town and between stints as a surveyor and lecturer, devoted the rest of his life to a fastidious documentation of the flora and fauna of Concord, Massachusetts. He entered field notes on scraps of paper. He collected specimens in a sewn-in compartment of his botany hat. He sketched. He pressed wildflowers between diary pages. Andrea Wolfe, writing in The Atlantic, reports on his compulsive meticulousness. He used his walking stick to take measurements. He logged the number of bubbles trapped under ice. He reported bird songs, cricket chirps, and the loping of a fox. Thoreau started his diary in October 1837 as a young man just out of college and kept it to November 1861 when he was too weak to write. He would die 6 months later. 150 years after Thoreau's authorship, Thoreau's prodigious catalog of leafing dates were used to document climate change. A compulsion to record our experience is the effort to find answers and make order out of chaos. 11, Foil Balls, Float or Sink by Carolyn Carter. And I think I'll stop here and use it as a tease to come back if we want to.
Thank you, Jane. I like to take notes while I'm listening to people read, and there were so many really cool ideas that I noticed when you were reading. And first of all, that opening is pretty powerful. I was a little bit nervous, and then I was laughing when you read the part of, but the appointment looms. I'm thinking, what about the snake? So that's perfect for the opening. And you know what I appreciate most, what you kind of brought up again and again, is this idea of documentation, and that a lot of diary writers, they use anything, paper, collage, anything, to just record. There's like this great desire to record. And I wanted to mention that part of Hidden Timber Books, um, you know, come to fruition was because of Lisa Rivero. She's the founder of Hidden Timber. Her great aunt Hattie, who was a homesteader in South Dakota and kept a daily diary from 1920 to 1957. And she wrote on spiral notebooks. She wrote on accounting paper and accounting books. She wrote on the steno paper. She wrote on anything. And just, you know, Lisa collected these, and she had stacks and stacks of daily journal entries. And it's a beautiful, beautiful treasure to have. So, you know, when you started talking about this journaling, I guess I'm curious, like, is that something that you've always done? Like, how did you get to that point of wanting to really create a book and share this about the White Snake Diaries?
Well, my first diary was a gift from my parents when I was 9 years old. And it was a 5-year diary with page prints for a page for each day of the year. And I took it literally, like I had to do it. And that set a discipline for me. But I think temperamentally, I just have saved what I write. And I think the discipline helped me. Even that little diary, I expressed appreciation for how it helped me calm down before going to bed. So I think maybe it's a way to help me notice things by writing. And now sometimes I read my old diaries before going to bed because it's not as demanding as books that I have to pay attention to. I'm curious about other people and how diaries have come into their life. Do they have them? Do they save them?
Please feel free, if anyone wants to drop their name in the chat box. I would love to hear it, as well as what people do and if they journal and how they use their diaries.
I have a thought about the process of diaries. And really, I can think that there are at least two kinds. And one is the kind that's private, of the sort you keep when you're 10 and you want to, you know, blow off steam at your mother or something. And that really is meant to be private. But then there are other diaries that are meant to simply record the events that you're going through, like a travel diary, where you want to keep track of what you saw, or who you met, or what sort of meal you have had. And Jane, in your keeping of your long-term diary, did you find that the focus changed as you got older? Were you more interested in recording events rather than feelings? Or when you were 10, was it more events than feelings? What would you say the focus, did the focus shift at all for you? That's a question.
That first diary had feelings and events, which I graciously shared in White Snake Diary. Some of the more irate feelings of my mom and dad. And then the things that I did. As I think it evolved more in terms of me figuring things out for myself, my reflections. during my formative high school years. I had some travel journals that were there to document something very special. And then during during familyhood, I was like, it was trying to figure out what the hell was going on since I had no time to myself. And so I kind of went back into just kind of grasping for a little bit of time to remind myself that I was still existing.
Existing as you. Yeah, good. Thank you.
And I see Catherine, you've got a comment. Would you like to unmute yourself and share that?
Okay. Hi, Jane. I just loved hearing the opening of the book, because it does make me feel like journaling is a really important thing to do, and even if you're the only one that reads it, it's really significant. It makes your life feel a little bit like just everything you do is significant. But what I said is I journal during travel, and I treasure reading them over and over again. It has made me realize that including feelings is such a key and kind of extra memory. And my family enjoys hearing the diary entries. And even the smallest little memory about a certain restaurant someplace, and what we ate, and where it was, it just opens up a whole memory that and it's very special to me.
There's a lot about memory in White Snake Diary, and the losing of it, or the trying to dredge it up. And recording in a diary is a lovely way to access what you might not have remembered otherwise.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, about how when you keep a diary, it sort of helps you pay greater attention to the things around you. And in that way, I think naturally opens up your mind, just sort of loosens your mind, so that, like you say, memory kind of can come to the surface, and memories that you probably didn't anticipate. Does anyone else have anything that you'd like to say at this moment, or any questions you'd like to ask, or should we go ahead and have Jane read a little bit more?
Hi, Aunt Jane. I have just a quick hello from my boys. They're here. They're getting ready to bed, and they wanted to say hello to you. Say hi to Aunt Jane. Hi.
Hi.
So she's going to keep telling us about the book. Okay. You want to show the book? Yeah, there it is. Vincent started a preschool today, which is very exciting. Good job. Okay, guys, we're going to let Aunt Jane keep talking about her book, okay?
Thank you,
Bye and good night. Now they're going to fight over the water cup. Okay, I'll mute myself. Aunt Jane, keep going.
Thanks. I see that Grace has her hand up, and then also Kit. So Grace, would you like to go first, and then Kit?
Hey, hi.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to kind of join the chorus of, yeah, journals are wonderful tools for observation and holding on to time in a way that I have not found other things to do. I've been kind of compulsively keeping journals since I was about 18. And I guess it was around then that I wish I had discovered it earlier. I wish I'd had that through high school, but I hadn't figured that out yet. I think I had a diary when I was about 10, and it was a unpleasant chore to try to write in it. So it hadn't taken yet, but by the time I was 18, I realized this was a place where you really could work through a lot of stuff. I feel like my journals have just been they're my go-to. They sustain me. I started making books about 23 years ago, so I've got many piles. I've got piles and piles of them, and I've got about 24, 23. I go through a made book a year. I have lots of other journals that I keep going on the side. I mean, I'm writing in a journal now. This is like a leftover student journal that was abandoned. And so if there are pages left, I take them back and I fill them up. But yeah, so I have these 20 or 20, I think at this point it's about 24 or 25 that I write and I draw and I paint and and a lot of times those things overlap. And I've exhibited them in book shows. But it does, regardless of which format, it still feels like holding on to time, and I find if I read back into ones from, say, 10 years ago, it really takes me to who I was at that time. And sometimes memory can be a little tricky. You sort of gloss over, you remember back at a time and you think about the way things were, and then you read your journal and you go, oh, no, it was actually, I did understand that then. So yeah, they're extraordinary. But I just loved your book so much because of all the weaving in of your experiences and your dreams and your and just and your research that you were bringing to it.
A sweet discovery when I was doing the research to find that scholars who studied women writing to themselves do it in a woven way. And I thought, oh my gosh, oh, how cool. Because that's what this book was turning out to be. So
yeah, I love that aspect of it, the weaving of all the different approaches very much.
Grace, did you want to ask your question?
Okay, so Jane, I want to say hi because I didn't get a chance to say hi before. Give you a big earth hug and 1,000 grandmothers hug. And it's very special to be part of this. Thank you. I wanted to just mention about your writing. When you were reading, you read so well. And I got a little tripped up there though, because at times you're reading and you've skipped on to other lines, but that was good. I got into it. Could keep up with it. And then I found your writing very crisp and saying so much in such abbreviated form. And just this description, I could see some of that in my mind. It's well done. As far as me, I was going to share about journaling. I do write in pads and slips of paper, and when I get thoughts, and somehow music triggers me in many ways. And I like to do poetic stuff. And I started this when I was around 21, when I went to first writing, keeping some journaling was in Hawaii, when I went to the University of Hawaii in the late 60s. And so I've been doing this off and on, and I tend sometimes to somehow the ancestors come in. So I'm, for example, I don't know why I had such an affinity with William Blake. And so off and on, he'd be talking to me, I'd be under a tree by the lake, and things like that, and just other ancestors that I connect with, that somehow it gets into the writing and becomes almost a little vignette of a fantasy, so to speak. But anyway, okay, so as far as the question, Jane, when did you first, how did it come about your, or maybe you, I don't know if I missed this, but how did it come about your idea about the diary, and how long ago was that, and how was your first, I mean, what drew you to that? And do you remember when it really, how far back it started, and when you actually started your first draft or first writings there of your pages?
It was the dream, which was way more than a dream. It was a visitation, and I was like, "Whoa, what the hell? What just, visited me?" And so that was a diary that was more than a diary. And then I just started collecting ephemera to go with it. And then I became curious about how other people write diaries, and so I did research on that. And I just kind of was following my intuition as to what to add, and it was only afterwards that I realized I was also writing to my mother. And that it was a way to honor her, and that I didn't realize until I was done.
Beautiful. Thank you. Special.
Great questions, everyone. I see, Melinda, you've got a question, and then Vita, part of your question might have gotten answered, but it seems like you might have a little bit more to ask. So Melinda, would you like to go ahead?
Well, yeah, I also have been keeping journals. Hey, Jane. Since I was a little kid, and in all different forms, from the little books that my parents gave me that had the page a day and a lock and key. And then after college, I started doing like journaling, sketching, and just learning about nature through drawing and writing about whatever's going on in the same pages, and I did that for years. And every time I travel, I document in one format, or when I'm working on some idea in my head, I always start off with, where am I today? Okay, I'm doing this, this, this. And so I have lots of journals, and what I wonder is, what do I do with these? I don't have children who are dying to, to take my journals and enjoy them for the rest of their lives. And I feel like when I go to a nursing home someday, if that's how it goes, I will want to bring my journals, because that's who I am in a nutshell, and that will remind me of who I was when I don't have the facilities to recall. But then I kind of wonder, do you burn them, or do you just let some stranger buy them at a flea market?
That's such a touching wonder. Some people who have read White Snake Diary were inspired to go into those boxes that they hadn't even thought of but had saved, and that's inspired them to reconsider their writing. Some people do have arrangements with a very close friend to burn them if something happens to me, because they don't want anybody to see them. That's the privacy issue. It's for yourself, but not necessarily for somebody else. So, who's gonna burn your diaries from the nursing home?
Yeah, I don't really have that much private stuff that it would be very, very embarrassing once I die. But but it's more like it's precious to me now. And will it just become somebody's junk later? Or maybe somebody really wants it and they would really enjoy looking at it.
There's art that is made from the self-inscriptions of others, and it's, you know, it's beautiful and very rich. The photos that I found that inspired this book was, you know, somebody's photo album that is no longer.
Yeah, that was touching.
Okay, I just want to add one more thing. I always think about Lisa Rivero's great aunt Hattie and how she wrote these daily entries and probably thought nothing of them, and they have become a real recording of history and culture and the times. And it's just, you never know where your journal's going to take you. Vita, I know you have a question, and then there are a few more, one from Bridget and Martha Lou. And I certainly want to get to hearing Jane read one more. So Vita, go ahead.
Real quick, I think the questions were answered. I wanted to know if you included entries that you had done previously, and roughly how long it took you to write the book.
I haven't wanted to find out because it was so long, but I think it had to have been at least 5 years, if not more, because it was a while to find a publisher that was willing to embrace such a genre bending project.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Me too.
That's always a great question. Bridget, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jane, for sharing so much of yourself in this book. I was amazed at how much I learned in reading it. And in particular, going back to you realizing you had written this book for your mother. I learned so much from the letters from your mother and to your mother that you shared in the book, and I want to thank you for that. It's just mind-boggling. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Brigida. Yeah, I'm very touched by the gift that Whitesnake Diary gives to a relationship that a mother and daughter can have, and the really touching way that the mother extends herself. It was poignant for me, and I was very humbled to share it.
Thank you.
All right, Martha Lou's got a great question as well. Go ahead, Martha.
Hi.
Hi, Martha Lou.
I'm interested in your research about journals in general and diaries. What format is the best format to preserve these things? I have in-book diaries from, I don't know how long. And then at a certain point, I converted to writing on my laptop. And I've been thinking, should I print the ones on the laptop to go with the others, or copy, you know, any wisdom about that?
Not from a technological preservationist point of view, because I don't have expertise, but from a pragmatic, experiential point of view, I myself just tactfully need access, or it's the digital space is kind of ephemeral to me. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like us human beings still need to experience things through our senses and our muscles.
Right. All right, thank you.
Wonderful. Jane, I would love to hear you read a little bit more before we go on to any other questions.
Okay. Oh, please everybody read Renata. She's a librarian and she an expert. I stopped at Foil Balls, Float or Sink by Carolyn Carter. And it was kind of a pickup to finding answers and making order out of apparent chaos. Instructions: take a foil square and crumple it up so it floats. Take a foil square and caramel it so it sinks. Hypothesis: I wanted to see what happened when I dropped my foil ball in the water. I thought it might float. Background information: aluminum is a silvery chemical. It is very light. It doesn't weigh much. It is easy to made into a shape. When it is made into foil, it is easy to rip. Aluminum foil is used for cooking and saving. It's used to make tape and bags. The Croydon ball is a famous aluminum ball in England. It's made of Kit Kat wrappers. It weighs 1,572 kilograms, and that is 3,458 and a half pounds. It has air trapped inside. Procedure: one day I got into the bath and I had a foil ball, and I dropped it in the water and it floated. Then I ran into the kitchen. I got another piece of aluminum foil. I got back into the bath. I crumpled it up under the water. I wanted to see what happened. The crumpled up foil sank. Then I told Daddy I discovered something. Conclusion: here is what I discovered. A foil ball crumpled in air floats. This is because air is trapped, and air is lighter than water. A foil ball crumpled in water sinks. The water trapped in the foil balls weighs the same as the water not trapped. So the weight of the foil makes it sink. The everyday details are what can bring the past alive, filling the gaps that the big history books overlook. Fortunately, we have an abundance of compulsive diarists who help us understand daily life in their eras. The noted English civil servant Samuel Pepys wrote a diary in shorthand. His is an unfiltered account of turbulence, culture, and domesticity of British life, including everything from historical events to meetings with royalty, dancing as a means of upward mobility, infidelities, and frets over his wife's irregular menses. He wrote from 1660 to 1669 until he stopped, thinking mistakenly that he was going blind. A diary found on the frozen body of Robert Falcon Scott, an Antarctic explorer, gives a harrowing account of his 2-year expedition in 1910, which ended in the death of his small team in a makeshift tent on the Great Ice Barrier. His diary ends with a plea to take care of the surviving families back home. Last entry: for God's sake, look after our people. Part 3, White Snake Sloughing. While we may adore the writings of Virginia Woolf and the literary elite of her time, Woolf herself adored the relationship she had with her entries in her diary, writes H. Porter Abbott in Inscribing the Daily, Critical Essays on Women's Diaries. In it, she used a loose stream of consciousness style, which facilitated her formulation of her modernist fiction. Lynn Bloom, in her essay, I Write for Myself and Strangers, quotes Woolf, reveling in the oscillating nature of her ideal diary form. Loose-knit, and yet not slovenly, elastic, so it will embrace anything solemn, slight, or beautiful that comes into my mind. I should like it to resemble some deep old desk or capacious hold-all in which one flings a mass of odds and ends without looking them through. 56. Last night I dreamt I was back in high school. After 2 years of college, I had to go back to finish my senior year and graduate. Funny that I can only find confidence from the past. I expressed the fear to Mom that I might become another Alma Thompson, a woman never married who's unhappy that way. Mom seemed to consider my fear as if it were a possibility. number 57. The form a diary takes can be as episodic and routine as its daily enumeration, or, as many of us said, open-ended and varied as the author's imagination. Day books are formatted into page day preprints. Other diaries are written on slips of paper, as if the ideas have inconspicuously inserted themselves into the author's consciousness. The chosen form of a diary indicates something about the diarist. Sedaris uses 8 by 9.5-inch plastic or wire-bound volumes that lend themselves to his assemblage of artwork and collected mementos. Thoreau transposed his initial slips of paper to a hard-to-decipher handwritten diary. Zickafoos, the ornithologist painter, swears by 20 by 30-inch sheets of 140-pound Fabriano or Winsor & Newton hot-pressed watercolor paper. There's something about the smooth, quiet surface of hot-pressed paper that helps me relax and keeps me from noodling too much detail into the paintings. With far less to work with, Nelson Mandela wrote his account of life in prison on a desk calendar. Nixon recorded his diary each evening on a dictabelt tape. This simultaneously elastic and tight feature of diaries, their content wide-ranging yet patterned, make them adaptable and flexible, notes Susan Bunkers and Cynthia Huff in their introduction to Inscribing the Daily, critical essays on women's diaries. 58. I receive a letter from home. Inside is a clipping cut out and taped to a ripped in half sheet of lined paper. I find this newspaper clipping so meticulously taped to the half sheet of lined paper truncated. Who wrote this? Is the author left in a swirl of imaginative doom? Or was there more to the piece than what Mom sent? I tuck the clipping into my diary where it yellows. 83. I have become the kind of person I'm used to tolerating with a generous spirit. Where I used to travel uncharted territory by thumb, train, motorcycle, bus, regularly reminded and thrilled by the power of serendipity, I now travel the uncharted grounds of my own routinized life. Again, relying on what seems unabashedly like serendipity when I remarkably find my way to a meeting place I've already been to. A finished piece of writing in the pile of recycling. Do I assume I am a wasteland of potential, or can I recognize the depth of water I choose to swim in? I'm gonna stop here. If anybody has more thoughts, I can also, if people want, there is a beautiful poem, an excerpt of which opens the book and an excerpt of which closes the book, but the full poem is not included in the book, but I can read it to you if you want.
I would love to hear that. And before you do that, I just want to add, it's so fascinating, I think, to hear all the history of other self-inscribers, that, you know, how they keep the diary and the kinds of things that they reported. And the things that stand out to me throughout this whole hour that you've been talking about it is that the diary is a way to surrender. It's free from restrictions, and that it's a way, you know, someone had said, that makes you feel important. And especially in a time like now when we're so isolated, it's a way to feel seen, which is so important in our human existence. And then what you read in that last bit about daily, or what we said in the last bit about daily details bring the past alive. I love that. That just reiterates the importance of keeping a diary, no matter, you know, if we think it's just silly to write down the menu that we had for the evening. And finally, just that idea, you know, I'm thinking about that huge aluminum ball of Kit Kat wrappers. It's the same idea of like tiny bits build up to this great purpose, you know? So tiny little entries build this great purpose with, you know, either a stack of diary and journals or a whole book, you know, whatever it is. So just really fascinating to hear all that.
I'm reading from a pre-publication book that had the full poem in it. So if you want to see the full poem, the purchased book has the citation, and you can find it online. It's really beautiful. It's called The Dragon, and it's by Bridget Pegeen Kelly. The bees came out of the junipers, 2 small swarms the size of melons, and golden too, like melons. They hung next to each other at the height of a deer's breast above the wet black compost. And because the light was very bright, it was hard to see them, and harder still to see what hung between them. A snake hung between them. The bees held up a snake, lifting each side of his narrow neck just below the pointed head. And in this way, very slowly, they carried the snake through the garden. The snake's long body hanging down, its tail dragging the ground, as if the creature were a criminal being escorted to execution, or a child king to the throne. I kept thinking the snake might be a hose held by 2 ghostly hands. But the snake was a snake, his body green as the grass, his tail divided, his skin oiled the way the male member is oiled by the female's juices, the greenness over bright, the bee's gold, the winged serpent moving silently through the air. There was something deadly in it, or already dead, something beyond the report of beauty. I laid my face against my arm, and there it stayed for the length of time it takes 2 swarms of bees to carry a snake through a wide garden, past a sleeping swan, past the dead roses nailed to the wall, past the small pond. And when I looked up, the bees and the snake were gone, but the garden smelled of broken fruit, and across the grass a shadow lay for which there was no source, a narrow plinth dividing the garden, and the air was like the air after a fire or before a storm, ungodly still, but full of dark shapes turning.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that whole poem. I think your book, you know, it leaves a lot for the reader to just contemplate, which again is the great purpose of a diary, I think. Whether you're the one writing it or reading it later, it's just thought-provoking, and, you know, like I was saying before, just really loosens up the mind and allows you to study things in a new way.
Thank you, Christy, for mentioning that, because I was hoping this book would be an experience for people, and the response that I'm getting is that it is, and that's very poignant for me because I think it's a time when reflection is really valuable. And I'm just very grateful that people are opening themselves up, because that's feels like a place where we need to be, even when it feels vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I did leave links into the chat box again if you would like to take some more looks at Jane Perry's website and purchase her book from Atmosphere Press. And again, the Sogorea Te Land Trust, hopefully I said that right, and 100% of the proceeds from purchasing this book go towards that urban women-led organization. And also, there's a link to read more about that organization if you'd like to. And Amy's just got a great comment in the chat box. Just one word, inspiring, and I would totally agree. So thank you again, Jane, and thank you to everyone who is here on a Tuesday evening. I know it's so nice to be able to connect online, even though we're not able to see each other face to face. You can stop by Hidden Timber Books and see some of the other readings that we have coming up. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Jane, before we close?
I'm just feeling very, very grateful to you and to Hidden Timber Books and to everybody who's come. Please stay safe and healthy, and I hope you and everyone has everything that you need.
Thank you so much. All right, good night, everyone. And thanks again for being here.